Fear Zone, the channel for supernatural and real stories, presents yet another intriguing account. In 2015, in the city of McAllen, Texas, USA, a 19-year-old named Peter lived with his parents in a secluded village surrounded by a few houses and small farms. The environment was peaceful but steeped in mystery, with dirt roads and vast wooded areas that seemed to harbor secrets. This peaceful routine was shattered by an event that would forever change Peter's life. At the time, Peter was a student attending evening classes. On an ordinary night, he returned home around 11 p.m., exhausted and eager to rest. After dinner, he decided to relax by watching a movie on television. Time slipped away unnoticed, and when he checked the clock, it was already 1 a.m. Feeling sleepy, he prepared to go to his room when, suddenly, the silence of the night was broken by 2 gunshots echoing through the surrounding woods. His heart raced, but despite being alarmed, he went to the living room window to try and understand what was happening. He peeked through the glass, but the darkness outside was dense, almost tangible. He couldn't see anything, and the silence that followed made him question if he had really heard the shots. He decided to ignore it, assuming it might have been a hunter. However, the tension soon returned with full force. Not long after, the dogs from neighboring houses began barking uncontrollably. The sound, intense and chaotic, seemed to come from all directions. Once again, Peter went to the window, this time more alert. That's when he saw something that made his heart pound, a shadow moving through the woods, slowly approaching. He couldn't make out what it was, but an overwhelming sense that something was wrong consumed him. The figure emerged from the shadows, revealing itself to be Mr. Fernandez, a neighbor who lived on a small nearby farm. He was gripping a shotgun firmly, his eyes darting nervously through the darkness, as if searching for something, or hiding from it. The tense, frightened expression on Fernandez's face made Peter realize this would be no ordinary night. Peter couldn't tear his gaze away, but he also didn't have the courage to open the door and ask what was going on. He remained frozen, watching as Mr. Fernandez disappeared back into the woods. The only question echoing in his mind was, what could possibly be happening that night to leave such a calm and composed man like Fernandez so alarmed? At that moment, Peter realized this was just the beginning of something far greater and more terrifying than he could have imagined. He couldn't shake the image of Mr. Fernandez from his mind, who, before disappearing into the woods, had stared intently at Peter's backyard. Something about the man's behavior unsettled him, as if he were searching for something specific. However, Peter decided to set the matter aside and tried to get some rest. Fernandez did not reappear, and the hours passed. Around 2 a.m., just as Peter was drifting off to sleep in his room, the dog's barking started again, abruptly interrupting his rest. The persistent sound of barking was soon followed by shotgun blasts echoing from the woods near the ranch. Moments later, he heard hurried footsteps, someone running. Alarmed, Peter glanced out the window and saw Mr. Fernandez sprinting down the road, still holding his shotgun. Fernandez jumped into a car parked nearby, started the engine, and sped away. The sight put Peter on edge. Something in the forest had terrified an armed man enough to make him flee. He considered waking his father but decided to wait and keep watch instead. As he scanned the area through the window, he noticed something strange about 8 meters away, a peculiar shadow standing still in the darkness. What caught his attention most were 2 glowing points that resembled eyes. A chill ran down his spine, and he was immediately overwhelmed by the sense that something supernatural was lurking, something straight out of a nightmare. Quickly, he shut the window flaps and locked the latch, but the sound of his pounding heart seemed to echo in his head, making it impossible to ignore what he had just seen. The dog's barking didn't subside. If anything, it grew more frantic, as if they were facing something incomprehensible. Peter's curiosity, however, outweighed his fear. Hesitantly, he peeked through the window's gap again and saw the shadow running toward the backyard. He tried to convince himself it was just a large dog, but the way the creature moved felt off, almost inhuman, which only heightened his fear. Gathering his courage, Peter carefully opened the window and looked outside. That's when his eyes confirmed what his instincts already suspected. This was no ordinary animal. The figure before him had a vaguely ape-like appearance, but its size was massive, and its glowing eyes seemed unnatural. The creature growled at Peter's dogs but, curiously, didn't attack them. The longer he watched, the more bizarre and terrifying the scene became. Peter called his dogs back into the house, determined to keep them safe from the creature, which seemed like an imminent threat. However, what happened next left him frozen in place. The creature rose onto two legs, revealing its impressive height, and turned its head toward him as if observing him intently. For a moment, it seemed as though the monster might attack the house, but instead, it began walking away quickly. Its movements were strange, limping and awkward, as if it were injured. The surreal nature of the scene left him paralyzed, unsure of how to react. The image of that creature, with features blending human and animal traits, and eyes glowing like torches, wouldn't leave his mind. It was something supernatural, beyond any logic. Was it just an injured animal, or something far more sinister? He wasn't sure, but his curiosity had transformed into fear. Watching the monster's behavior as it continued walking on two legs, the dogs followed closely, ready to attack since it appeared weakened. The being growled, keeping the dogs at bay. He began to suspect that Mr. Fernandez had wounded the creature, and the idea that it might be a werewolf started to take root in his mind. When the monster reached the backyard fence, it crouched down and began moving on all fours again. This allowed it to pass under the barbed wire fence and vanish into the darkness of the land beyond. He stood completely frozen with fear, but now he was certain that creature could only be a werewolf. Its appearance resembled that of a giant dog with dark fur and such an oppressive presence that it seemed to make the air heavier. With his heart racing, he decided to keep watch, staying alert for any sounds or movements. But despite the unsettling silence, the creature didn't return. He spent the rest of the night sitting in the living room, too afraid to close his eyes. As the clock ticked by slowly, his mind kept questioning whether it was truly possible for men to transform into monsters like that. At dawn, relief came with the sunlight, but exhaustion overtook him as well. He finally managed to sleep but didn't bring up the incident with anyone in the family. He was still trying to process what had happened. That afternoon, when his father returned from work, he decided to share what he had seen. However, before he could finish recounting the events, he was interrupted. His father already knew about what had happened with Mr. Fernandez. His father explained that rumors were circulating in the village about an attack on the neighbor the night before. According to the accounts, Fernandez had been at his property trying to capture the animal that had killed his chickens and gravely injured one of his dogs. He had almost been caught in an ambush in the backyard, but managed to spot the creature in time. Armed with his shotgun, Fernandez fired 2 shots at the animal, but it escaped and fled into the street, disappearing into the darkness. The neighbor quickly decided to pursue the creature. He started his car and followed it to a thicket, where he saw it disappear into the dense woods. Determined, he got out and continued on foot, walking into that thick forest. It didn't take long before the beast suddenly emerged from the bushes and lunged at him. The attack was so sudden that he barely had time to react. As he tried to step back, he stumbled and fell, but even then, he managed to fire his shotgun. He claimed to be certain he hit the creature's hind leg, though the following shots missed their mark. Despite being wounded, the beast didn't flee immediately. It backed away a few meters but remained nearby, staring at him intently, as if calculating the perfect moment for another attack. The farmer, overwhelmed with desperation, aimed again, but this time the creature decided to retreat, disappearing into the dense forest. The neighbor, utterly terrified, still didn't know what kind of creature he had encountered. The only certainty he had was that it wasn't an ordinary animal. Once he realized the beast was no longer around, he took the chance to run back to his house for safety. Later, when recounting the incident, he mentioned that the creature's eyes glowed intensely, like bright headlights, a haunting image that he couldn't shake from his mind. As his father recounted the story, the boy's thoughts returned to the scene he had witnessed the previous night. Suddenly, everything started to make sense. The way the creature limped while running, its terrifying gaze, and its menacing presence. However, despite all the evidence, he still struggled to accept the possibility that it could have been a werewolf. The question of whether men could transform into such monstrous beings continued to haunt his thoughts. Throughout the day, he tried to act normal, but it was impossible to forget what he had witnessed. The following night, his fear was even greater. He stayed alert, listening for any suspicious sound or movement. From that moment on, he could never look at the vacant lot the same way again. When he told his father that the incident had happened near the family's ranch, he firmly stated that the creature was a werewolf. His father confirmed that Mr. Fernandez had repeatedly mentioned the glowing eyes of the beast, something that seemed to haunt him constantly. The boy's routine changed completely after that night. Every time he walked home from school at dusk, an overwhelming fear gripped him as he navigated the dirt roads. The thought that the creature might still be lurking nearby was terrifying. He couldn't stop thinking about what he had seen in the backyard, and the questions remained unanswered. Could the creature still be around? Was it truly a werewolf? One day, Mr. Fernandez mentioned to an acquaintance that he genuinely believed the creature was a werewolf. However, he chose to tell the neighbors it was just a regular animal, thinking no one would believe the idea of a werewolf. Fernandez also noted that the man responsible for the attack might have been injured in the leg, exactly where he claimed to have hit the creature with his shot. As the days went by, Peter became obsessed with finding answers. He started searching the area for anyone who might be injured, looking for any clues that could reveal the identity of the creature. Weeks passed, and then something strange happened. One of the new teachers at school suddenly stopped teaching. The administration announced he had suffered an accident, but the details were vague, and no one seemed willing to explain what had happened. Soon, rumors began circulating among the students. Some said the teacher had been shot with a shotgun, with a bullet hitting his leg. Others claimed he had been the victim of a stray bullet. The stories were confusing, full of contradictions, and no one knew for sure what was true. For Peter, however, the situation sparked a troubling suspicion. What if that teacher was actually the werewolf? Could he be the same one that attacked Fernandez and appeared in the yard? The pieces started falling into place in a disturbing way. The possibility that the accident involving the shotgun was actually the shot fired by the old man on the night of the attack wouldn't leave Peter's mind. Despite all the doubts and theories that arose, no one at school or in the village seemed willing to discuss the matter further. Over time, people began acting as if nothing had ever happened, leaving the mystery shrouded in silence. And so, Peter was left alone with his thoughts, trying to unravel a puzzle that might never be solved. After all, was the teacher really the werewolf, or was it all just a coincidence? These questions remained unanswered, leaving only suspense in the air. Despite all the doubts and theories that kept swirling in my mind, no one seemed to want to talk about it anymore. Both at school and in the village, people started acting as if nothing had happened. And I was left alone with my thoughts, trying to decipher a mystery that, perhaps, will never be solved. Well, everyone, that was my story. Now, I leave the question to you. Was that teacher really the werewolf? Or was it all just a coincidence? I'll leave it for you to decide. And, of course, thank you for watching the video. If you liked the story, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Until next time.